My first guest today is Professor Colin McLeod, who drives the Innovation and Accelerator programs at Melbourne University. Colin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. Lovely to be here.
Colin, you've got an interesting background. You've got a nice mix of academia. You're also at Telstra, the AFL and Goldman Sachs. Now you're running there's multiple programs at Melbourne Uni. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what Melbourne Uni offers in the entrepreneurial space?
Sure. Well, I think the one that's probably the best known is the Melbourne Accelerator Program, or MAP, which was the first university accelerator in Australia. So launched in 2012. We're about to announce the 9th cohort. And we also have a program called TRAM, which is Translating Research at Melbourne. That's really aimed at our research community. I think everyone knows that Australia is really, really good at research. We're probably less good at turning that research into impact, if you like, whether it's economic impact, social impact or employment. So we have a program, as I say, called TRAM, which is to help our research community understand more about entrepreneurship. And I also manage the relationship with the Wade Institute, which hosts the university's Master of Entrepreneurship program.
And you were head of research at the AFL for a period of time.
I did a couple of different jobs at the AFL, and in fact I left the AFL about 11 years ago, but I've had an ongoing relationship as a member of the AFL Research Board.
Hard to avoid it in Melbourne Sound. So today you're announcing the latest intake or the latest cohort that's coming to the MAP program. Can you tell us a little bit about a couple of the businesses?
Yeah, sure. I think there's some really interesting businesses, and when you look at the sort of problems they're trying to tackle, one's called Team Timbuktu. So while we're doing this discussion today, there'll be 500,000 plastic bottles going to landfill in 10 minutes. And Team Timbuktu is recycling that plastic and making it into leisure wear and active wear. Now, it's a small contribution, but it's an important contribution. We also have teams like Insight Infrastructure Solutions. And now, this might sound like an absurd number, but when you think about the fact that a single container ship uses the equivalent of 50,000 cars worth of fuel in a year, we need ships, we need shipping, but if we can do it more efficiently. So what these guys do is help keep the hull clean, and that produces small but really important improvements in the efficiency and fuel use. And when you look at the fact that there's something like 50,000 cargo ships in the world, and at any given time there's a lot of them at sea, even a 1 or 2% improvement would have a massive environmental and economic impact.
Fantastic. In terms of what the accelerator programs offer, for anyone that's thinking about applying, what do they actually get from Melbourne Uni?
In pure dollar terms, we give them $20,000. We give them some space.
But cash is always important.
Cash is always important for young entrepreneurs. In fact, I shouldn't say young entrepreneurs, any entrepreneur. We also give them space in the MAP area. So MAP has its own designated space at the University of Melbourne. But we also give them active access to a team of mentors. And one of the things we know about any successful ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem, is that mentoring is really critical. And we've now reached a stage where teams that went through MAP in 2012, 13 and 14 can come back and be mentors to the teams that are currently going through and give them the benefit of their experience.
Fantastic. Almost, you're developing your own alumni program.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the very first year of MAP in 2012, we had 4 teams. It was just an experiment, I guess at that time. And out of those 4 teams, 3 of them are probably still actively involved in MAP. And in fact, the 2 people who were running MAP at that stage, Rowan Workman and Maxine Lee, towards the end of that first year, now run Skalata Ventures. They came and spoke to my class at the Master of Entrepreneurship program the other day. So we do try and help each other out. I think we're really lucky in Melbourne. We have a very supportive ecosystem, and universities have an important role of being at the heart of that ecosystem.
You mentioned space. Melbourne Connect. Can you tell people what that is?
Sure. Melbourne Connect, I think a lot of people in Melbourne would know the old Royal Women's Hospital site in the corner of Swanston and Grattan. The university's putting up a new building which is being constructed by Lendlease, which is, we're calling it Digital Futures. And so in there will be our computer science department, there'll be tenants from industry, there's a co-working space in there, and that's also where the groups that I look after, the Translating Research at Melbourne program and MAP will be located. But the great thing about it is it then becomes a bit like a front door to the university for industry. And so we know that collaboration is really important. So we can't have impact just by staying in our labs or at our computers or at our desks. We need to work with the industry to produce better solutions.
For people that might not be aware of what an accelerator program does and how important they are to businesses, I guess can you give us an idea of some of your rockstar graduates of the program? I know my friend Mike Halligan, who's got a subscription pet food business, went through the program and raved about it. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the other businesses that have come through that people might be knowing or about to know about?
I think the one that people would probably know the best would be Neura. Neura make headphones. Funnily enough, if you talk to the people involved in selection out of 10...
Could have used those over the last couple of weeks here.
I expect business might be good for them at the moment. If you talk to people involved in the selection process, out of 10 teams, they were probably 10th. So they sort of, were on the margin. But I think they've raised about $30 million in venture capital. At the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, they were voted the best new electronics product in the world. And they've had rave reviews, and it's one of those things that one of the founders, Luke Campbell, was a doctor and also doing a PhD in audiology, and he came across this unknown fact, or relatively unknown fact, certainly outside the medical world, that your hearing is unique. We all hear things differently. Your hearing is actually more unique than your fingerprints. And so Luke used that knowledge to develop headphones that actually adjust to your own hearing. So instead of all of us hearing things differently, we now hear it the same. They had this great tagline: for the first time in your life, you can hear Mozart the way Mozart wrote it.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
It is one of those ones where some companies can grow organically and they can be bootstrapped and make some money, invest that back in their business. If you're getting into the consumer electronics business, you need to get big fast,
yep.
and hardware is expensive to develop and then market. So I guess going through a program, like you said, they were lucky to get in, or they were a little bit fragmented on the way in, but they've really blossomed on the back of that program.
I think that's a really good point, because for a company like Scratch, Mike Halligan, who was in here recently, they can start generating revenue fairly quickly. A couple of years ago, we've got a company called Nudie-Glow, which imports Korean beauty products, and Ruby Wang, the founder of that, was generating, I think, $1 million in revenue by the time she finished the MAP program. But if you're building a technology platform, then you might still, even though you've been through the program, it might still be a year or so away from generating revenue. So, and this is where the ecosystem becomes important, because it's not uncommon for people to finish at MAP and then go into a program like StartMate, which is managed by Blackbird Ventures, or through Scalata and their accelerator program. So I think all of us working together, understanding where we fit in the ecosystem, really helps make a more well understood journey for entrepreneurs.
It's interesting, you hear a lot about accelerator programs. Probably the most famous one in the world, YC, out of Silicon Valley. But in the last probably 5 years in Australia, the two things I've really seen blossom are the venture capital industry itself and accelerator programs, where there's a much more support and fostering of small businesses and really innovative businesses that has always been around, but it's never been as communal as it seems to be now.
I think, funnily, you mentioned my AFL background, and I remember the board of the AFL always saying maximum competition on the field, maximum cooperation off it. And I think accelerators are a bit like that. We sort of compete for talent. We compete for talent both in terms of the startups, but also in terms of talent to run the accelerators. And as you know from your own experience, we're very lucky at MAP. We have a very talented team. But I think where we can cooperate, we do. And so one of the other things that we're involved in at the University of Melbourne is I suppose you call it a joint venture with RMIT and the City of Melbourne to develop an accelerator program aimed at the research community, particularly around medtech.
Fantastic. So when I first became aware of the MAP program is I went to a demo day, which was literally like a sound and light show. I thought I'd walk into a concert. They were over at the old Meatworks over in North Melbourne.
Yep.
In COVID times, it's not possible to run those kind of events, and we're not really sure when it's going to be. At Ticker, we are going to broadcast the next or help you guys broadcast the next demo day. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you see that playing out?
I don't think any of us would deny that doing things face to face is much more enjoyable, much more fun, and so on. But funnily, even in my teaching, I found that doing some things online has sort of expanded our minds about what's possible. For example, last night I was having a Zoom meeting with a student in Pakistan. A couple of days ago, we had a bit of a joint program between MAP and the Master of Entrepreneurship students, where we had a guy called Paul Tracy, who's a professor of social innovation at Cambridge, zoomed in and spent a couple of hours online talking about social innovation. I've been regularly going to a class at Stanford that a mate of mine runs over there. So I think in that respect, it does help us expand our thinking about, well, maybe it doesn't all have to be face-to-face and it doesn't all have to be online. But I think in terms of the relationship with Ticker TV, or the work that Ticker's doing with our startups, I think actually the work you're going to do to help them present their ideas in an electronic environment will give them some digital assets, I guess, that they can then use as part of their story. And we all know that a lot of successful entrepreneurship is about the story you create and the narrative you have, and this will help them tell their story more effectively.
Pitching is so important. I mean, pitching and storytelling are two words that often get overused and misused, but it really often is the difference between getting into a program, getting some venture funding, getting that key investor. So I think fantastic. We're seeing, it's becoming a Zoom world. Zoom was a term that really only existed 6 months ago in the investment or the venture capital community, and now it's literally became a word like Google, where it's gone to become a noun.
It's become a verb, a noun, an adjective.
It really has. We're seeing people getting married online now and having their friends and family watch that. In terms of the teams presenting, what extra forms of training do you think they need when you can't? There's a lot less of the walking and talking on stage. What do you think are the key things to putting together a good Zoom presentation?
I think substance always matters, and I think one of the, that old saying about you can't put lipstick on a pig. Well, I think a lot of people think pitching is about sort of selling and giving all the highlights. And I think what people are always looking for is expertise. Does this person really understand this market? And I think one of the things I actually enjoy about teaching is it forces you to take a whole lot of information and put it into a 20-minute presentation, which is about the maximum you can do on Zoom. So I think the idea of doing things electronically and doing it through Zoom really helps people take all these different ideas they've got and distill them down to the core information that they need to give to an audience that may not have the same expertise they've got. I always think that one of the great hallmarks of expertise is being able to explain what you do to a non-expert audience.
Yeah, it really is. Domain knowledge is one thing, but if you can't communicate it, it's almost worthless, isn't it? Colin, really looking forward to the partnership, looking forward to be able to help you guys with the demo day and see where that can take us. Thanks for coming in this morning. It's a little bit odd in here. You're the first guest I've had in the studio for a while. It feels like it's unfamiliar territory.
Well, as I was saying, it's the first time I've driven my car in 6 weeks, so I was worried I might have forgotten how.
Professor Colin McLeod from Melbourne Uni's MAP program. You'll be seeing more of them and more of their I guess pupils isn't the right word, more of their graduates coming through Innovate Today.